Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. And your mission, if you choose to accept, is to watch Impossible Fallout with me, Ben, and my co-host.
Jim, or as I like to call myself, Ethan Hunt. No,
You are
I'm not.
the Simon Pegg of this film. I'm the Ving Rhames.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
You think he'd be happy with that comparison?
So, welcome to the podcast, guys. Yes, this week we watched Mission Impossible Impossible Fallout. It's so hard, but punctuation's important.
So
I've decided arbitrarily when it comes to colons and movie titles, yes, it is.
All right, sure. That's the hill you want to die on.
So this is a Jim pick. So Jim, do you want to hit us with that movie synopsis?
I do. So this is the synopsis for Mission Impossible Fallout. When a high-stakes mission to recover 3 missing plutonium cores goes bad, Special Agent Ethan Hunt of the IMF, played by Tom Cruise, is forced into a global game of cat and mouse as he endeavors to recover the cores to prevent global terror attacks. Ethan's invaluable teammates Luther Stickle, played by Ving Rhames, and Benji Dunn, Simon Pegg, join him on his quest, along with an unwanted teammate in August Walker of the CIA, Henry Cavill, and a mysterious figure from Ethan's past in Ilsa Faust, Rebecca Ferguson. Together, the team attempts to uncover the identity of the mysterious international terrorist known as John Lark, while also recovering the plutonium and keeping their CIA watchdogs at bay, all while participating in a series of ever-escalating and thrilling action sequences that culminate in a breathtaking finale that pushes the team to its limit. And I'm excited. So look, we jumped straight in today, but this is definitely a Jim pick. And not only that, I actually, at the time of recording, so we reserve the right to look at any future installments and that sort of thing from this point onward. But I am here planting a flag saying that this is the single greatest Mission Impossible movie of the 7 chapters that we've currently got. This thing, it really is up there with one of the greatest action movies of all time, in my personal opinion. And I've got a laundry list of reasons as to why that is, but I absolutely love this thing. I've got several things about it that I just think are absolutely outstanding, but that's me. And I know that you, Ben, don't really, saddle up for this kind of film. So what did you think of it?
Well, before I'll hit you with the facts and then we'll go into my thoughts, because I've had a complicated journey with this film, as you know, some backstory to it, and we'll get to that. But this movie was released in 2018, directed by Christopher McQuarrie, The Usual Suspects, Public Access, plus he's probably worked on every Tom Cruise movie since 2008. Written by said Christopher McQuarrie, starring Tom Cruise, Henry Cavill, Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, Rebecca Ferguson, Sean Harris, Angela Bassett, Vanessa Kirby, Michelle Monaghan, and Alec Baldwin. Budget of $178 million. Box office return of $791 million. This movie, like most Mission Impossible movies, made the monies. Okay, yeah, look, I'm not like a James Bondy spy movie type person. I usually enjoy bits and pieces of the film. And look, I'm going to straight out say I enjoyed this Mission Impossible. Now, there was some confusion earlier in this week in that I watched the wrong Mission Impossible for this podcast. I watched Mission Impossible 5, Rogue Nation, which, to be fair, made this movie more enjoyable because some stuff carries over.
Yeah. It was if you could have gotten it wrong and watched any Mission Impossible, being someone who's not familiar with the film series, like probably 5 is the best you could hope for, in the sense that at least it's going to give you some continuity as you head into 6, because most of them are quite disconnected from each other. Not totally, but enough, whereas 5 into 6 has a lot of connective tissue.
To be fair, if I'd gone into this movie and they'd hit me with like Syndicate and Faust and all that sort of stuff, I would have felt a little extra lost. And the reason I don't like 5 as much as I like 6 is that the spy espionage stuff is cranked to 11 in that number 5 movie, where in 6 it's kind of like an 8 out of 10. Like, it's still, there's a lot of espionage, but it's not as kind of like, it's not as twisty. I didn't feel as kind of unnecessarily convoluted. But yeah, I enjoyed this movie. The action, as in any modern Tom Cruise movie, is top tier. Like literally the best you can see on screen in this day and age. Like the stuff they do, the set pieces, even the storytelling within the action. A lot of cheaper action movies, they do action for the sake of action. Tom Cruise action tells a story. Like people, and we'll get to it later. People always mention, "Oh, Tom Cruise runs in every movie," but Tom Cruise in another life would have been a fantastic WWE wrestler. The way
Yeah.
he sells pain, the way he kind of, people say he runs really well. Him getting up off the ground and looking up hurt is maybe his best acting move, in my opinion. And he does this in this movie so many times, and he looks so exhausted and so tired. So, look, genuinely, I had a blast with this movie. So, thank you very much. And I'm really glad it's the movie we were meant to watch and not the one I watched first.
Yeah, I definitely look. I enjoy all the Mission Impossible movies for different reasons sometimes because they are actually quite different from one another. This is, like I said, without a shadow of a doubt, my favorite in the series. You know, including the one chapter that we've had, which actually comes after this one. So it's not like this was necessarily the latest movie, you know, at the time that we're recording this. But so you've already briefly touched on it. The action in this film is something that, since you sort of started in on the stunts, I feel like that's where we should pick up because
It's special.
really this movie is very special from an action perspective, you know. So, and it's not just one stunt, you know. That's the thing here, is that there are sequences that build on one another that are so well constructed, you know, and also so well shot. One of the things with action is you need a performer who can actually do these movements and this choreography, or even in this case pilot these vehicles, you know, or drive these motorcycles, these cars, these helicopters, right? Do this skydiving stuff. So you need the performer who is physically capable of all that, but then you must be able to capture it in a way that is going to, as you said, Ben, tell the story, but also be visually spectacular. Because as someone who watches a lot of action movies, far more than you, I'm sure, just because it's not as much your genre, but there are so many examples out there whereby the team has gone to extraordinary lengths to do something practically, but they have not captured it in a way that is spectacular for the audience or makes you feel that reality. And Mission Impossible Fallout is different. Mission Impossible Fallout, they not only do the things that are incredible to, you know, view from a behind the scenes perspective, but then the way they capture them in the film is also outstanding and really makes you feel the reality of what it is that they're doing.
I know you'll know the answer to this question, and I have a guess as to the answer. Does Tom Cruise insure his own movies?
I don't believe so. However, this film does hold the current, you know, record, if you like, for largest insurance payout when they had to close down production because he famously broke his ankle.
Yeah, doing the roof jump.
While they were doing the rooftop chase, and they shut down for functionally 2 months. And even that's a story in its own. That's a separate podcast, whereby they were supposed to shut down for much longer, but Cruise, being Cruise, needed to get back to it, you know, so he was doing that as soon as humanly possible. Actually, if we're talking about that for a second, so the foot chase sequence that happens at sort of the midpoint of this film, which I think is a spectacular sequence in and of its own right, they actually shot the shot where he breaks his ankle. That particular jump was the very first part of the foot chase that they actually filmed.
Of course it was.
And so the entirety of the rest of that chase, he is doing post broken ankle and recovery, you know.
And broken ankle's a light term. Like he shattered that thing. Like
Yeah,
he
well, you
did a
can
lot of
see it.
damage.
The take in the film, they actually did 2 or 3 takes prior to the shot where he actually does break it, but the moment where he breaks his foot is present on screen in this movie, you know? So even that in and of itself is pretty darn cool. So look, that foot chase, I think that foot chase is absolutely outstanding. There is some camera work there involving a drone that's orbiting him as he's running along the rooftop. Then we segue from that to a hidden cut, which takes you to a separate location where he does the ankle break, you know, and then we move on to the rest of it. But one of the cool things about that sequence from a stunts perspective is that sequence is Ethan or Cruz is doing all of this incredible work that's, you know, very, very action oriented, and Henry Cavill's character is actually just walking. You know,
Yeah.
it's a chase. He's literally, because Cavill's character is so far ahead of him when the sequence begins, and then Cruz is trying to do the catch up through the whole thing, which is sort of unique in and of itself, you know. And it's half about the navigation of it and how he actually is going to get there at traversing across these rooftops, which just an outstanding sequence. And the end of that sequence has one of the greatest Tom Cruise runs ever. There's a low angle shot as he exits, you know, and is coming around to the Tate Modern, and it's just a spectacular Tom Cruise running shot. So
before we move too far on from this, I do have some Tom Cruise running facts that you may know of. So the first one is Tom Cruise, in all of his films, has run 29,961 feet, or 9 kilometers. That's on screen. That's not how far his character would have had to run in real life. His longest run. Do you know what movie his longest run on screen was?
I'm going to call it Mission Impossible 3.
Correct. At 3,212 feet he ran.
It's the Shanghai sequence at the end. It's outstanding. It's absolutely outstanding.
The other Tom Cruise running facts. The older Tom gets, the further he runs in each film statistically. And, interesting fact, correlation does not equal causation, but the more Tom Cruise runs in a film, the better it does financially. So, there are your Tom Cruise running facts, and I have been Ben. Thank you very much.
I love it. So I'm very proud of myself that I got his longest run. I'm like, oh, I know that. I'm so familiar with Cruise and with running, like, you know, like, so. But look, so that's that sequence. That's the foot chase. Like, also, he is demonstrating his proficiency with almost every vehicle that he can actually handle in this movie. The bike chase is absolutely incredible in this movie. Now, there's a bike chase in Rogue Nation as well, which is quite different, which is the film immediately prior to this one. But there is something very special about the Paris bike sequence, you know. And actually, there's something in this film where, when I talk about capturing the action, there is a particular shot which is actually replayed multiple times in the film, and it starts with the camera quite far away from whatever Cruise is doing, and Cruise actually enters frame and speeds up and then pauses right in front of the camera. So first time it happens is actually the skydive sequence, which is just this incredible moment where the camera falls out of the aircraft. He then jumps out and chases it, you know, before actually pulling up, and we see his face in midair, which is just incredible aerial photography there. And then we see it again in the bike chase, where he comes in speeding in from a real distance, round a corner, and then pulls up right in front of a camera as he continues to go basically full throttle. You know, we see it in a car at the very start of the movie when he's on the airbase. You know,
it's intelligent filmmaking. I mean, because what's the point of having your star do the stunts without clearly showing it they're doing it from start to finish? Because, I mean, like, even if the audience doesn't immediately click to that's what's happened, I think your brain recognizes you're seeing something more polished because of it, right? You don't have weird cuts. You don't have weird jump betweens to suddenly put the actor in place. Your brain is experiencing a more seamless film because he does his own stunts and they can show his face in camera as he does them. Like, back to that bike chase, because I happen to watch both films, the storytelling between Rogue Nation and this with motorcycles is actually kind of intriguing, because it reintroduces one of our characters in this film, Fallout, from Rogue Nation, Ilsa Faust, and one of her big things in Rogue Nation is a massive motorcycle chase that she wins. And it's kind of that reverse storytelling in this film, and that reintroduction again. You're like, oh, wow, okay, she's back. She's on the motorbike again. That's really cool. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So, and it's just sort of that's what I meant about capturing the action. They're so good at capturing it and showing you that he's doing it. In fact, the BMW that he drives in the Paris sequence, as well as the helicopter that he pilots at the end of the film, were both specifically selected because of the amount of glass that they actually had
Showed.
at the front of the cockpit in the case of the helicopter, and then the windshield in case of the BMW. But they were selected for that reason because what they were doing was actually the opposite of what you would usually do in a chase vehicle. Usually, if you do what's called hard mounting the camera, which is where you literally bolt the camera with some pipe to the actual car or the helicopter, usually you would be trying to get very close to the vehicle to hide the fact that perhaps that there's green screen behind it or something like that. So here they were kind of doing the opposite. They were hard mounting to the vehicle, but trying to get the cameras back so that they could show that, hey, all the surrounding stuff, this is actually our guy doing it, for real. Like, if you like. Now, that's obviously a crazy term, for real, but there is an incredible amount of actual, very sketchy, very dangerous stuff. Like that, the helicopter chase. Like, what did you think of this helicopter chase?
I did immediately look up how much of that he did. And when you find out what he did in that chase and that sequence, it's insanity. The reason he looks so good on film doing stunts is there is an insanity there. There's a broken will to prove that he can do things. He is a sheer force of will and power. And that's evident when you look at that. Like that that ends in death if that goes wrong. There's no injury if that goes wrong. That ends in death. There's not so many safety precautions you can put in place to make that so safe that that's not the only outcome if those stunts go wrong. Like, that's crazy.
And I think as well, the helicopter chase has two sections which are both outstanding for different reasons. The first section is him jumping onto the payload bag, climbing up the
Yeah.
rope in midair as it ascends into the sky, and then like literally like holding on underneath the helicopter and doing the long line fall. That stuff remains some of the most spectacular imagery that I've ever seen. And it was captured in this sort of large format,
Yeah.
if you like sort of
It's real wide,
the
shows everything. There's no
well,
hiding.
that's right. It's got some of the best aspect ratio reveals I've ever seen as well. Like, I don't know if you know this or recognized it. Most people don't notice it, but once you actually have it pointed out, you're like, that's really cool. Like when he's actually bolting full tilt towards the payload there for the helicopter about to jump onto it, they do an aspect ratio reveal. And almost every time, ever since The Dark Knight, when Christopher Nolan started playing with aspect ratios and large formats, it's usually you get the letterboxed where you get the bars on the top and bottom, and they usually just do hard cuts. They just do a hard cut, and suddenly we are now using the full frame, the more vertical aspect ratio. And this actually, as he bolts towards the bag, it does a gradual
Yeah.
reveal. It actually like expands out and actually opens it for you. And it's amazing. Like, it's so incredibly cinematic when you actually watch that occur, and then you watch what he does after that point in time. And then of course there's part two where he actually ends up in the helicopter and piloting it, and you're like, well, this is obviously incredible for a completely different reason.
Yeah. So we've talked about the stunts a lot. This is an espionage movie, and espionage movies hinge so much on not only their action and their kind of the suaveness on screen at times, but also their plot and script. Like, espionage can be muddy to watch at times and things like that. And there were a couple of times in this movie where I felt it was a little muddy, or motivations, even with twists, didn't make 100% sense to me. Like the spoilers, I mean, we've done this podcast forever and never cared about spoilers, but the villain reveal in this movie of Henry Cavill actually being John Lark is kind of like, I saw that coming in the wrong way, if that makes sense. Like, sometimes you see something coming in a movie and you feel gratified when it happens. I didn't get that buzz from guessing this twist, because I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, it's the way this movie had to go.
I think also, though, then they're not necessarily trying to
No.
make that a huge reveal for the audience for that reason. You know,
Yeah.
there's a limited number of characters. They're probably not all heroes, particularly the new ones. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I think the film kind of knows that, and it doesn't play it as much of a reveal. It's more the way it's revealed with Benji and the
Which is
mask and that
cool.
sort of thing is sort of more designed to sort of shock the audience. I think, yeah, I think that the twisty nature of this film works just the right amount for me. Where, and I've watched it so many times, the heroes don't know most of the information at most of the points in time for this movie, and they say that they don't know,
Yeah.
which actually means the audience doesn't know. And there are some things that we just never find out, but we don't actually have to. It's almost like there's an alternate cut of the film, which is entirely from the villain's perspective, where
Yeah.
they're having a separate kind of problem solving cat and mouse thing as the heroes throw a spanner, and then the villains are throwing a spanner, and then it sort of goes back and forth like that. That would be a fun cut to actually see, the Henry Cavill, a Sean Harris version where they're trying to do their part to both trap Ethan Hunt and beat him.
So, as the Mission Impossible expert, I have two questions, and they're kind of connected. In every Mission Impossible movie, does a new director come in, doesn't believe in them, and tries to cancel them? Because that happened in two movies in a row.
So that doesn't quite happen in every movie, but I will say that Ethan Hunt goes rogue in every Mission Impossible movie except for this one. He goes the least rogue, if you like. Like, this
Okay.
is actually him staying pretty much on script. Like, at least his IMF director is like, yeah, bro, do it. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so sure, the CIA is not real wild about what he's doing, but like, at least his immediate superior is like, absolutely, this sounds great.
I
You know
love
what I
at the
mean?
end of both movies, they're like, "Oh, I get it. Yeah, you're important. We need you."
Yes,
And you're like,
that's
"Okay,
right.
cool. I'm glad we went on that same journey twice."
Yeah, but that is sort of, and that's also one of the things I appreciate about Fallout, because as a Mission Impossible fan, like, we've seen him go rogue for the right reasons time and time and time and time again. So to have that aspect actually downplayed in this movie, I kind of appreciate it as a long-term fan of the series.
The other thing they did in this movie, and I don't know if they've done it in other movies, is I call it explaining Superman. There's a moment in this movie where they explain Ethan Hunt, and they're like, "Hey, you're always going to be the guy who prioritizes one life over another. You're never going to be the guy who sacrifices the one for the many." It's that kind of like, it's kind of like explaining why Superman doesn't just take over the world, right? Like, he has this internal compass. Is this something that is mentioned or displayed in other movies, or is this kind of like the crescendo where people are finally going like, "No, this is him. He's never going to change."
It's really that second one. So it's seen absolutely in a visual way and in a story way, but it's not actually directly commented on. So that's also why this movie is special in the series, because we actually get a comment on our protagonist's character and who he is and who he is always going to be. Now, we've seen that displayed from a visual standpoint and just through the course of him taking certain actions in previous films, but this is the first time that we actually really put a stamp on it. We talk about it. It's integrated into the plot. It's a vital part of the villain's plan to trap him, and also that uncompromising nature of what the hero is going to do in order to save the day, and also what they aren't willing to do. So
Yeah, okay, cool. That's kind of like my two things. This movie does feel like, if you're talking about it in Marvel aspects, it feels like the end of a generation, this movie. And I've only seen three of these movies. I've seen Mission Impossible 2, 5, and 6.
well, that's a
Like,
very interesting mix.
so, so it feels like there's a culmination, because I'm guessing she's in the earlier movies, but his wife is also like rounded out. That story is rounded out in this movie, where people who maybe have followed it all the way through get an ending to that.
it's
And
it, it's a
yeah,
there was a chance for this movie to really wrap up almost every not quite, but pretty close to every previous Mission Impossible film. So and there's one little sort of Easter egg that didn't end up coming off, but basically, so Ethan's wife Julia is introduced in Mission Impossible 3, okay, which is the one that J.J. Abrams directed, and
yeah.
it's actually the first introduction of Simon Pegg's character as well. So it's a
So
really
it's the
important one.
formula.
It's a bummer you haven't seen it, because that's a really important one as well for the series. That's a great entry in the series, actually. So this film then, obviously, it gives resolution to Julia's storyline in a way that I think is excellent. It also gives you that insight into Ethan's character it definitely cements his team of Benji and Luther, and really tells you sort of how they're going to work together. It gives you a resolution in a way, and sort of a new beginning to Ilsa and Ethan from Mission Impossible 5. And it was also going to originally kill off the character played by Jeremy Renner of Brant, who was
Yeah,
introduced in Mission Impossible 4. And I actually was like, a part of me just goes, oh, that would have been that extra bit of connective tissue if we had have actually been able to do that as well, and kill off Brant, towards the opening of this film. Then that would have really brought all these different entries in the series together in this way that could have been really cool. At the same time, there were multiple reasons why that didn't happen. One of them was Jeremy Renner, wasn't, look, it's sort of rumored, so it's hard to say, exactly what happened, but basically these movies are shot in a way that is the opposite of what we talked about last week with Galaxy Quest. This is a huge example of on the fly filmmaking, but not in a bad way, in a way where they plan for it to be on the fly. They get locations, they get action, and then they're writing the script, rewriting the script, having ideas, pivoting. It's sort of not quite improvisational, but it's a very
fluid.
creative, fluid, free form kind of way. Then that's the way that they want to work. Macquarie and Cruz love working that way. They love discovering the story, having ideas, going back and reshooting stuff. And it was reported, whether or not it's true, who knows, Jeremy Renner does not like working that way. And so, having done two of the films and
Yeah,
then getting a little bit like, what are we even shooting today? What is going on? What are my lines? Where are we? We were supposed to be in this country. We're actually in this country. What is happening? So I get that not everyone would necessarily want to work that way. So that was one of the reasons that they said, he didn't want to come back. And the other thing was, apparent, like, he was committed to Avengers at that time, which was the 2-part finale. So, but look, that said, we might see Renner again in one of these. You never know. You take that with a bit of a grain of salt. Whenever someone reports that that's why someone's not back, it's like, is it? I don't
is it?
know.
That's
Like,
someone's opinion who maybe viewed that from afar. Like,
yeah. Or was that what the actor said at the time? And then after a couple of years, they're like, actually, you know what? I'm ready to saddle up again,
yeah,
because that happens all the time. So, but look, I think, yeah, so it is interesting in that sense. The other bit of connective tissue that you've got is, and this is going deep, but Vanessa Kirby's character, who is the White Widow, is
mm,
actually, and she's referred to in the film, so this is canon if you like, but she's referred to as being the daughter of Max, who is a character from Mission Impossible 1, played by Vanessa Redgrave. So we actually go all the way back, if you like, and get some connective tissue way back to 1996 with the first Mission Impossible film ever. So there's a lot of cool stuff for fans here. But again, if you don't know any of that, the film still totally works.
it definitely does. I do think watching that fifth movie, it does help a lot, especially when they're talking like the Syndicate and stuff like that. Like having that background is good. And talking about the Syndicate and in this movie, the Apostles, the villain, the secondary villain of this film, what's his name? Sorry.
Solomon Lane, that's his name.
I find
So
him rather boring as a villain. I found him kind of boring in number five, and I kind of find him boring here because he's just kind of broken, like a little bit crazy and really smart. And like in this movie, he's probably a bit more dimensional because he has the revenge aspect to him, right? It's like, he's like, you thwarted me. You're the one who is better than me. I need to be better than you. He doesn't outright say it. Other characters say it around him, but like there's that part. And he even goes so far to say, "Is like, I'm happy to die to get my revenge." Like there's that real kind of weirdness to it. And it makes the connection between his character and Walker's character or Cavill's character real odd to me, and maybe it's meant to feel like that.
yeah, it's interesting. I had a similar, I guess, reaction to you. Much as I love Sean Harris as an
Yeah,
actor, I did not particularly like Solomon Lane as a villain or a character in Rogue Nation in Mission
yeah,
Impossible 5. I actually also felt that, the character didn't feel particularly threatening to me in that movie, even though he was saying and doing dastardly things. There was something about it that just wasn't quite clicking. But I actually think the character works really well in this movie. And this might be contrary to what your feeling was, but like, when paired with Henry Cavill, I felt like I had all I needed. I had this sort of very physical character who is described as literally the hammer, of Henry Cavill, of August Walker, who can do all the physical stuff and keep up with Hunt. And then I had the more cerebral kind of, villain from Sean Harris, who was actually, as you say, quite unhinged in this movie. He's been tortured now for a number of, I guess, years, and or questioned, if you like. We used the gentler phrasing.
Straight on, not treated well.
Yeah, not treated well. So he's quite unhinged, and I felt like that was a more interesting take on the character for me. So, and almost the idea as well that Henry Cavill's character of August Walker, or John Lark, however you want to call him, it was almost a bit of a succession thing for me. It was like Sean Harris's character was kind of broken by this whole thing, and he was willing to die and basically be done, and who would take up the mantle and the cause, and that would be Walker. Do you know what I mean?
So Walker was part of the syndicate?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I thought so.
Yeah. So he's part of the syndicate, and he's sort of the number two, if you like. And then obviously the idea that he's going to actually get away at the end, he was going to become the number one. At least that was my reading of it anyway. I think it's a fairly logical kind of conclusion. So, but look, I also think that the plot works really well. It was quite kind of a magic trick to wrap up the Julia plot line in a way that's satisfying for audience, while also paying off the Ilsa Faust storyline. Because particularly, I mean, if you've seen Mission Impossible 3, which I know you haven't, we as audience, we loved Julia. Like, she was a great character.
She wasn't a spy. She was like a real world person.
No, she was a doctor. So, and she was great in that movie, and audiences, had a lot of love for the character. So very difficult to actually write her back in, but not have Ethan end up with her. And yet they managed to do all of that in a very satisfying way for an audience, which I thought was really great.
The person who played her new husband, I thought did a fantastic job of acting out what that dude would have been feeling. Because
Wes Bentley, right? Yeah. And this is the actor. Wes Bentley has made a career of taking smaller roles than he should actually have. Wes Bentley should always have a much more major role, and he pops up all the time. He pops up in like Underworld 4 for about 2 minutes, and I'm like, Wes, you should be the lead of this, like not the lead in the sense that, Kate Beckinsale's movie, the second lead. You should be the second lead in this movie. What are you doing? And here again, I'm like, it's Wes Bentley. Wes Bentley's amazing. What is he doing here for like 3 minutes at the end?
The confusion and not believing what is happening in front of him, but just accepting him because he loves his wife.
Yeah.
Is because like even when he kind of leaves him, like they've rescued Ethan Hunt and he's on the bed. Hey, you're lucky your friends came to get you, and he's like, there's something else here. I don't know what it is. I'm just going to trust my wife is saying it's okay. It's okay. I'm going to live my life as if it's okay.
He literally, when he's walking away from Ethan's hospital bed, he literally like raises his eyebrows and goes, "See you around, doc." Like, like there's no way you're a doctor. That's just what you introduced yourself.
Just one of those small moments. And there was also a really good comedy moment jumping out the window. Like the whole like 2D, 3D screen lock. That whole sequence was it could have overwhelmed that piece of action. It didn't, but it was a nice little bit of humor.
Yeah. It's awesome. So it also had a good amount of the plan working as intended, and then the plan going wrong and having to improvise, and that mixture of things sort of working in that way. Like, and it's had this really great sequence as well where, we saw something play out that would have been quite horrific when we look at the heist, and then when they play that back, Ethan's plan is to do it with minimal loss of life, he
runs the plan in his head as they're talking about it, going, if we do it their way, this is going to be awful.
Yes. And it's a really nice moment of actually half tricking the audience into thinking, oh, they're going to do that? And then how far is he going to go with that particular thing? So look, do you have any criticisms of the movie? I'm very surprised that you liked this as much as you did. But look,
I have the same criticisms I have of like a James Bond movie or another movie like this, even to a lesser extent, like the Fast and Furious movies, which are like the popcorn version of these movies. Is there are moments in this movie where the character does or reacts or says things or knows things that is godlike because they have to be able to get out of a situation. It's less in this movie than in some of those other movies. And as I said, like the spy tropes don't always 100% click with me. Although I feel like, as we've talked about it, they did bury a lot of those tropes in this movie. There weren't as many of them as often as repeated. Um, like they did try to kind of, I think, stick to a more kind of straight run through of a plot. There weren't as many kind of big detours.
Well, the team's
Um,
constantly on the move in
yeah,
this movie. Like they
it
are
helps.
constantly moving from one thing to the next thing, and there's no time to sort of catch your breath or do like, the classic kind of big spy dinner party where they, have a slow talky moment. There's no time for that. We're just moving from moment to moment, and the plot's just demanding that we go that
And
fast.
where this works a lot better than in my head a James Bond movie is that it is, even though it is Ethan Hunt, it is a team. There is Simon Pegg, there is Ving Rhames, there is in these last two movies Elsa Faust. There is people who complement and do things that he can't do in that moment, and that's more enjoyable to me than watching someone who is portrayed as a human being rampaging through a group of people. It's why I enjoy modern Bond a bit more than I enjoy older Bond. Like the unstoppable aspect of the spy never really appealed to me. Like it's like Superman doesn't appeal to some people because how do you beat Superman? There's two ways to beat Superman, all that sort of stuff. But look, what this movie does well overshadows any weakness it has in plot or character, or like the extra apostles are given very little time to be dangerous, if you will, except for chasing people, right? It would have been cool to see a bit more one-on-one fights with some of those apostles and things like that. The brother of the broker
Zola.
lady,
Yeah, Zola.
it felt a bit wasted or unnecessary to him be that way. Like, why? Like, it's just conflict and creating a character that you're never going to pay off. Like, they never paid that off. Like, the jerk never got his comeuppance, or
Well,
really. Like,
you got to watch Mission Impossible 7.
awesome. Okay, yeah, no. Unless you make me in this podcast. The thing is, what it is about these movies is I'll sit down, I'll watch them, and I'll enjoy them, but there's never a moment in time where I self motivate to watch them because I've got other things I'm interested in. And I think that's my thing here. It's not like I necessarily dislike them, it's just I like other stuff more.
Yeah. I see. I'm an action junkie, and when action is shot as well as this is, that is something that I want to rewatch. I want to look at where did you mount the camera? What does that look like? Where's the rigging for the harness? Where's the paint out on those
Yeah.
wires? What is actually being done sort of for real? Like, and this is the movie where, and they really spoiled me. This has got like 3 audio commentaries on the home release. Like, there's plenty of special features and behind the scenes footage of why they did what they did and how they did it. So I love looking at all of that. But ultimately, I wouldn't be doing any of that if I wasn't first invested in the story, the
Yeah.
characters, and the way it all, comes together. So because I only get interested and want to go back if it all comes off really well as a package the first time. And in this movie, it just does, it just does.
Agreed. Overall, I enjoy the movie. I'd recommend this movie to just about anybody who likes the genre. I may even tell them to watch the other one first just to give them the complete picture of the story that's told in this film. But yeah, thank you so much for suggesting Mission: Impossible Fallout.
No problem. Well, why don't you tell the good people of the interwebs where they can find us, because I am interested to see what impossible mission you have for us for the next cast.
So if you want to catch our next podcast or go see some of our or listen to our old stuff, you can do so in a couple of places. You can do so on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify, and all those places you can find us at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. If you do find us there and you do like us, please like, comment, and subscribe. We really do encourage you to comment with movies that you'd like us to watch, because, you know, we watch a lot of movies and sometimes things fall through the cracks and we forget about certain movies, and you can remind us and we can go watch those movies at your behest. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so in two places. You can do so on Instagram, Jim_and_Ben, or TikTok, Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. Now, next week's movie, I kind of self-inspired myself. I brought this movie up last podcast, and I haven't been able to get it out of my head that we should watch it next. Now, I want to watch it next for two reasons. One, I'm a completionist. If I start collecting something, I want to finish collecting something. We've already done that once with the Gremlins movies, and we're about to do it again with, I'm pretty sure I see a knowing nod, Bill and Ted Face the Music.
Nice.
The final in the Bill and Ted trilogy. We will finally finish it off.
There you go. So it's sort of weird that this is the series that we've decided to complete.
You start things in the middle. I've been able to do this 1, 2, and 3. I'm so proud of myself.
They are all Ben picks. You've been very committed to finishing the Bill and Ted series. So look, I'm excited for it.
This is one I haven't seen.
And me neither. So this is one where I was sort of, if you look back at our previous casts, I was going back and forth as to whether I'd seen number 1 or number 2, but I can tell you I have definitely not seen number 3. So look, I'm looking forward to it.
Next week, we'll face the music on another Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. Thanks for joining us. This mission will self-destruct.